Colleagues, it is my pleasure to welcome you to this first session on green approaches to COVID-19 recovery. The pandemic has created an unprecedented situation resulting in significant economic challenges across the world. Effective and long-lasting post-COVID-19 economic recovery plans need to reflect coherently the three dimensions of sustainable development, putting the most vulnerable at the centre of recovery efforts. Whilst an enormous challenge, this process also presents an opportunity to strengthen the commitment made under the Paris Agreement and to invest into a more sustainable future with stronger health systems, fewer people living in extreme poverty, reduced inequalities, a healthier natural environment, and more resilient societies. By approving national COVID-19 economic stimulus packages, parliamentarians can seize the opportunity for promoting a holistic recovery that encompasses all dimensions of sustainable development. Through their legislative and overseeing role, parliamentarians will be pivotal in embracing the opportunity, as Speaker Pelosi has just said, to build back better, ensuring current economic recovery endeavours adopt the principles of a green economy, such as low-carbon development, resource efficiency and social inclusion. Our panel today will discuss and try to identify key parliamentary actions that can be taken to facilitate a recovery from the pandemic, so that climate and development commitments linked to the Paris Agreement and other development agendas are met. How can parliaments and parliamentarians ensure that COVID-19 recovery plans support the transition to more sustainable economic models that are aligned with climate action and sustained development? What national efforts are being undertaken by parliaments to ensure recovery packages promote and address climate change? We have three main speakers with us today, each of whom will speak for 8 minutes. At 7 minutes, I will indicate 1 minute left, and at 8 minutes, I will ring the bell to indicate that the time has ceased for speaking. I will now give the floor to Ms. Maria Nere, Department of Public Health, Environment and Social Determinants of Health, World Health Organization. So, Ms. Nere.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Thank you, dear parliamentarians. This is a great opportunity for us to address you. We know the power you have in your own country. We know how influential you can be, and therefore it's for us a fantastic, and we are very grateful for giving us this opportunity. Being myself a medical doctor and being myself from the World Health Organization, you will not be surprised if I am here to present you the health argument for more climate action. You heard this morning many reasons from the economic point of view, from the environmental point of view, from the emergency, humanitarian, inequities point of view. Why do you need to act? Why, as a society, we need to change completely our way of living, consuming, producing, recycling, and transforming our society. We heard as well the young people demonstrating in the streets. I think this is the first time in history where the children are telling us that what we are doing is blah, blah, blah. So let's look now at the health argument and see whether, by using this health argument, by putting our lungs very much at front of all of this debate, by putting how our body, how the human health is affected by climate change, we can accelerate the action to tackle the causes of climate change and to be more ambitious. You know, on environmental conventions, you have to do things because you need to protect the planet. What we want to do here is to protect human health. And we have been losing a lot of time And as you can imagine, when he's talking about health, the time is really very, very short. But I will be very positive. In fact, the health arguments for more climate action more action on climate change are very positive. Essentially, what we are saying is that if you implement the Paris Agreement, if you execute, if you are committed to put in place what the requirements of the Paris Agreement are asking you to do, in fact, what you are doing, and maybe you don't know it, is to implement a public health treaty. And probably one of the biggest, strongest, and powerful public health treaty. The benefits for our health coming from tackling the causes of climate change will be extremely positive. If you tackle the causes of climate change, if you move to a more sustainable, renewable sources of energy, in fact, what you will do is one of the most immediate benefits will be the reduction on air pollution. And the reduction on air pollution will mean that we will be able to reduce the 7 million premature deaths that we are having every year. And I repeat, 7 million premature deaths that we are having every year due to exposure to air pollution. That will be one of the biggest benefits coming from tackling the causes of climate change. Will be good for the economy, will be good for the society, will be good to generate more jobs coming from renewable sources of energy, and at the same time will stop polluting our lungs, polluting our cardiovascular system, polluting our brain, and causing all the horrible damage that is causing now. The moment we engage on this healthy energy transition, the benefits on the health system will pay by themselves the investments that you need to do now to move quickly and more ambitiously to those new sources of energy. Second good news, if we tackle the causes of climate change by moving into a more sustainable food production and consumption, including the waste management of the food that we are now wasting, which represent 1/3 of the production. If we move into that, imagine the benefits for our health coming from healthy diets. Imagine that we could engage on a nutritional pattern with healthy diets, and again, the benefits of that will be enormous. Today, we are still giving subsidies to fossil fuels. And you know what? On all of this estimation on how to provide subsidies to fossil fuels, you forget, or our politicians forget, to include an economic cost of that, which is that burning those fossil fuels are representing $5 trillion in cost for the health system. Means that the combustion of those fossil fuels are causing chronic diseases that will require the hospitalization for a long time, in addition to the death, of course. But in addition to that, losing years of healthy lifestyles that we are not able to do it because of our lungs will be affected by chronic respiratory diseases, among others. Use the legislation. WHO very recently has presented the new air quality guidelines. We know that they are very challenging. We know that they will require a lot of political courage from you to change many things, but the lives that you will be able to save, if you implement the recommendations in terms of air quality proposed by WHO, we could reduce by 80% the number of deaths caused now by exposure to air pollution, and this represents 5.6 million. Imagine that you as a politician, you can reduce by 80% the 7 million deaths we have caused by air pollution. That will be a fantastic political opportunity. I will vote for you if you do that. I'm sure that your citizens will vote for you, and I hope that you will be able to sell that argument as the most positive one. Nothing motivates people more than their own health. These days we are talking with movements that are called Moms for Clean Air or Moms Warriors, because they see how climate change and air pollution is affecting asthma, for instance. Who doesn't know an asthma patient? When you've been in touch with a child who cannot breathe, and then you need to, after treating that asthma case, you need to send that boy or girl back to a street where he will be again exposed to high levels of air pollution, then you need to change the legislation. Then you need to put in place an air that can be breathed. And this is all about climate change mitigation. If you put in place all of those measures, you will have a better mobility, your people will be more active, less sedentary lifestyle, less obesity, more social interaction in our cities. The mayors can help a lot on promoting this sustainable transport. The politicians, the parliamentarians, you can make sure that you have new laws giving us the right to a healthy, sustainable environment. And then you can claim as well the economic benefits that will be associated to all of that. I don't know, Mr. President, whether I need to finish here?
15 seconds.
I finish. My argument is very clear. If with all of those positive news, with all of those health benefits that you can generate, you are still not convinced, then we cannot claim later on that we didn't know. We knew the science is there, the opportunities are there. Use the health as an argument because it will be very powerful and will accelerate action and people will understand and follow us. Thank you very much. Just in time.
Thank you very much, Director Nera. Near perfect timing. I now give the floor to Mr. Ajay Mathur, Director General of the International Solar Alliance, who will connect with us remotely. Mr. Mathur.
Can you hear me now? Okay. Sir, thank you very much for this opportunity. And I thank you for giving me the privilege of sharing my thoughts with you. You, the parliamentarians of the world, have come together to discuss an amazingly important issue. It's an important issue that affects all of us. And it's an important issue that can be addressed only when all of us change our habits, amongst other things, to use renewable energy instead of fossil fuels. Sir, I believe that the COVID pandemic, which has been so devastating to all the countries around the globe, also has a silver lining. And the silver lining is that in the COVID recovery packages that have been put across the world, we have seen opportunities of new flows of credit for economic growth, for creating jobs. Whether it is Australia with its $90 billion term funding facility, or Nigeria with a target credit facility worth $139 million US, or many, many other such things, whether it is Paraguay or Thailand or the West African Development Bank. In all of these, we have seen more and more credit being available for creating new businesses, for providing new jobs. However, except in the developed countries, these packages have not been directly focused on green opportunities. In Finland, 51% of the recovery package, about $2 billion, will support the green transition. In Japan, the COVID relief package worth 73.6 trillion yen includes a specific mention of incentives for green technologies. So does the Ukrainian package, or the European package, or the US package. However, what we need to ensure is that the credit that is so now easily available in all parts of the world is used for the transition to renewable energy. We are seeing that renewable energy and energy efficiency technologies across geographies are being driven by their low marginal cost. This is important because for reasons of competitiveness, for reasons of productivity, we are seeing that industries across the world are choosing technologies which have a lower cost of operation. Remember that fossil fuels, when they are used to make electricity, almost 50% of the cost of electricity is to pay for the fossil fuel. That's not the case in renewables. And that is why an increasing number of capacity generation that has been set up in the last 2 years has focused on renewables, not only by the public sector, but also by the private sector. These provide us with the conditions for countries to develop a thriving renewable energy sector that is globally competitive. It creates the conditions that favor the development and scale-up of technologies that will drive the future for clean energy, including green hydrogen, including the evolution of the chemistry of solar cells, the chemistry of battery technologies, but all of these are inherently risk-taking technologies. We are seeing that, especially in the developing world, in the least developed countries and in the small island development states, investment money is not flowing in. And consequently, the move towards green is not happening. We need to correct that. Parliamentarians of the world, I request you that our challenge now is to get enough investment money into all countries and at interest rates that the countries are willing and able to pay. I will give you an example. In some sub-Saharan African countries, the interest rates on monies invested in solar are as high as 11 to 13% per year. At this rate, it is not sustainable. I request you across the world to set up a global risk mitigation facility, which would provide confidence to the private sector to invest in renewable energy in all parts of the world. This is important because this provides the ring of confidence within which investments, whether they are from banks or from funds, can flow in and expect that they will earn a healthy return. Signora e signori, by doing this, we help people get clean energy, especially those who have never had clean energy. We help people pay less for energy. We help people live in cleaner atmospheres, whether inside the house or in larger urban areas. And we help the world to move towards a lower carbon trajectory and ultimately to a zero emissions future. I thank you for your attention, and I look forward to your deliberations and hope that in the years ahead, we will see you come together to fight this risk of climate change and at the same time enable the improvement of the lives, the betterment of the lives of people. Thank you very, very much.
Very many thanks, Director General Mathur. I now give the floor to Mr. Bruno Pozzi, Director, United Nations Environment Programme Office for Europe. Mr. Pozzi.
Thanks a lot, Mr. President, and thanks a lot, honorable parliamentarians. Really pleased to be with you and represent the United Nations Environment Programme today. Let me start by with some news coming from Geneva and the adoption by the Human Rights Council of a resolution on the right to a clean, healthy and sustainable environment just this afternoon as we were gathering. It is an incredible step towards incorporating this concept in international practice, and I wanted to start by this news that I see personally as a very good news. A month ago at the General Assembly, the SG, Antonio Guterres, called for action. He said we are on the verge of the abyss and we really need to take action. This is reflected in his report, Our Common Agenda, that was published a few weeks ago, and that puts climate, the environment and the planet at the heart of the global commons that we have. Dare I say, making the environment maybe a public good that we need to look at. As you know, the planet is facing a triple planetary crisis, and we hear a lot today about the climate change crisis, which is absolutely real, and that we will have to take another step forward in tackling at COP26. But let me remind you as well about the crisis of biodiversity, which is absolutely real as well, with 1 million species being on the verge of extinction, and the need in 2022 to adopt a new global framework on biodiversity. And let me remind you as well of the pollution crisis on air quality and other dimensions that have been tackled as well previously, bringing these three crises together as we head towards these different COPs and UNEA 5.2 on pollution, notably on marine litter and plastic, because we've got a chance to amalgamate our efforts and really put the grounds to tackle these three crises together. And COVID-19 definitely, with the recovery packages that it brings, is a chance, a unique chance to accelerate action on the Sustainable Development Goals and on those critical agendas. The Green COVID Recovery, we've calculated in the UNEP emission gap report, could, if well spent, cut off 25% of the emissions by 2030. And there's wide agreement across all parts of the world that the most effective stimulus policies are those that create recovery through decarbonization, through backing nature and tackling pollution. But yet, we're not building back better yet. We've estimated in another report that was done with the University of Oxford, the IMF, UNDP and GIZ, that out of 3,500 policies in 50 major economies in 2020, only 18% of the recovery spending and 2.5% of this total spending had positive green characteristics. And when you come to nature, which is the very fundament of our societies and our economies, it is a disappointing small 3% amount of the total spending which is spent on it. So basically, many of the big developed economies, most responsible for the three planetary crises, are edging closer to a full return to the old polluting ways. And we need to do better. And for this, we propose to invest in 5 areas. The first one has been discussed already many times today. It's to provide efficient energy. Equity and connectivity, of course, to the people who need the energy, but at the same time, reduce the greenhouse gas emissions by prioritizing clean and renewable energy, moving away from coal, redirecting fossil fuel subsidies. There's no future in fossil fuel. The second thing is to go to clean transport. Almost a quarter of the energy-related CO2 emissions are from the transport. And we can promote clean mass transit, cycling, walking networks. We can decrease emissions from the aviation sector, as we've seen, for example, by replacing short domestic flights with rail journeys. The third sector is in the building. Green building and the construction industry is an important contributor. I mean, the building industry is an important contributor to the emissions. So we can shift to clean energy and energy efficiency in the building, but also to material efficiency. And if we do that, not only will you use less resources, but we will also green the construction sector, creating green jobs in it and improving the living and working conditions of many. Every $1 million which is invested in retrofits in building or in efficiency measures in new builds can create between 9 and 30 new jobs. The fourth sector is the natural capital. Nature-based solutions, ecosystems restoration are critical allies to fight climate change and restore biodiversity. If you invest in nature-based solutions, you can provide about 1/3 of the annual climate mitigation which is required by 2030 to keep the global warming to under 2 degrees Celsius. It's a solution that nature provides to help fully decarbonize our economies. And as I said, actually at the moment, we only invest less than 3% of the recovery spending in nature capital. And that's a clearly missed opportunities that we hope we can seize in the future. The last sector is to invest in the clean research and development. We need to innovate. The investments in green research and development stood at around $30 billion in 2020, and we need to do more. These investments will be instrumental in developing the innovative solutions for the future, support a decarbonized circularity, a sustainable agriculture, a cleaner industry, and so on. The conversation is not only about spending indeed, it's also about addressing the way markets finance these processes and how they price the externalities. This means accounting really for the value of nature and the damage our economic activities cause to it. So incorporate the environmental dimension in all political and economic decisions. We must also be sure to show solidarity by making sure that capital flows to create the supply chains in circularity in the developing world and ensuring that the developing nations see high benefits from the investments that they make in helping the world solving these 3 planetary crises. In conclusion, we've got a unique opportunity and we really have now to kickstart, to accelerate the action to create the world that we want for the future, living in harmony with nature for the benefit of all. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Director Pottsy. I will now invite delegates to join the debate. In order to allow the greatest possible participation, contributions will be limited to 2 minutes. I have already received indications that 16 speakers and heads of delegation will intervene in the debate according to the list that was shared yesterday. So I will first call Speaker Chowdhury from the House of Nations, Bangladesh. Speaker Chowdhury.
Thank you, Moderator. It's an honor for me to join the pre-COP26 parliamentary meeting in the beautiful city of Rome, Italy, with my delegation from Bangladesh Parliament. I express my heartiest congratulations to the organizers, the Parliament of Italy and Interparliamentary Union for organizing this very important event. I would just like to share very briefly the green approaches to COVID-19 recovery adopted by Bangladesh. Bangladesh is now focused on steering the country's progress towards poverty-free, climate-resilient, sustainable development with recovery measures. It is believed that no recovery can be possible unless it is fair, inclusive, and ambitious. Decades of development gains could be wiped out. For the economic recovery from the COVID-19 crisis to be durable and resilient, a return to environment-damaging, business-as-usual investment patterns and activities must be avoided. Hence, instead of formulating a separate COVID-19 response and recovery plan, which could slow down the ongoing development initiatives, degrade the environment, and harm the climate, Bangladesh has blended the COVID-19 recovery strategies in the macroeconomic framework, along with a broad-based strategy of inclusiveness, adopting a green growth strategy in its 8th five-year plan. Despite being a highly climate vulnerable country, Bangladesh wants to actively play its part in the global collective action to reduce future GHG emissions. Even though the main focus of Bangladesh activities is on increasing resilience to the impacts of climate change, Bangladesh is also committed to follow a progressive approach to developing its economy on a low-carbon pathway with increasing emphasis on renewable energy and energy efficiency. More than 6.2 million solar home systems installed in off-grid areas, ensuring electricity access for 12% of its total population in remote areas. Now giving further emphasis on solar mini-grid, solar irrigation, and rooftop solar projects.
Time up.
Thank you.
Honourable Member Prast, Member of the Senate of the Netherlands.
Good afternoon, dear colleagues. COVID pandemic has given us a health argument. It obliged us to think about our health. It was a start of a disruptive thinking. It was rethinking our ecosystem. It was a rebooting our ecosystem. And in the beginning, everyone thought it was only for a few months. But 2 years later, we're still wearing masks FFP2 after being tested, and only a part of the world is vaccinated. So for us, restart the economy or normal life, just like before the pandemic, was not an option. And because of the lockdown, we fought against loneliness. We were searching for small green places to recover the nature, to protect our economy. And so we take the opportunity and decide together with the European Union to start up a national recovery and resilience plans. We budgeted in Belgium only around 6 billion euros, but at least 50% of these 6 billion euros are green investments, with focus on hydrogen grids, greening the mobility, greening the cities, but especially in energy efficiency. Because that kind of investments has a lot of advantages. Each kilowatt hour which is not consumed is the cheapest one and the greenest one, and really helps the households. So, dear colleagues, maybe a little bit strange to say, but take this opportunity of the pandemic to reboot your economy, but not in a normal way, just like before, but in a greener and other way. Thank you.
Now, the Honourable Member Maria Prast, Member of the Senate, Andreas Griffroy, First Vice President of the Senate of Belgium. He's called, and now Maria Prast, Member of the Senate of the Netherlands.
Prima di tutto, grazie al Parlamento italiano per la sua ospitalità.
First of all, thanks to the Italian Chamber of Deputies for its hospitality. I'm very glad to contribute as a member of the delegation of the Netherlands Party, as a representative of the Animal Rights Party. Two suggestions I have to make to promote sustainability. We require no public funds, and there is no restriction on the freedom of choice of citizens. Last week, the Dutch Foreign Minister, responding to a question of mine in the Senate, said that, according to the government, meat products should be excluded from any food production funded by the EU. And I would invite all of you to take on the same position adopted by my government. Why is this important? Meat consumption is one of the main reasons for climate change and world hunger. Production of one beef hamburger requires 1,500 liters of water and emits 1.5 kilos of greenhouse gas. Years before COVID, the scientific office of my party warned of the risk of a pandemic from because of animal contagion. The second thing, the Nobel Prize winner Richard Taylor has demonstrated that 80% of people accept what is offered as a standard supply. And this is why the Animal Rights Party in the Netherlands has proposed that the standard choice for official dinners should be vegetarian. Those who prefer meat can express this choice beforehand, as is the case now for vegetarians. The city of Amsterdam and almost all universities have chosen this system, that carnivores, meat eaters, should record themselves. And I invite you all to adopt this approach in your countries. Thank you.
Chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee of the Italian Chamber of Deputies.
Grazie.
Many thanks. Chair, this is the parliamentary COP, and so we need to ask ourselves what's the responsibility of parliaments and what can parliaments do to achieve the goals which have been indicated. I believe that we have two responsibilities. The first concerns our relationship with our electors. I think that in our constituencies, in the relationship with our citizens, we have the duty to lead an increase in sensitivity, awareness of how strategic this environmental issue is, and that it requires to be considered a priority by all. We've seen a big event of young people recent days, and we know how aware of this issue young people are. However, this awareness is not found in all age groups and in all social classes. Yet the issues we're discussing concern the life and the future of the planet and the life and the future of all of us and our societies. It is responsible for it's necessary for political representatives to work in order that citizens acquire this awareness. And we have a responsibility as legislators too. Our parliaments have the responsibility of achieving the goals which are represented here in legislative terms, how to pursue climate neutrality, what rules have to be applied, how we can harmonize fiscal regulations, and how we can incentive proper investments in research for biodiversity. How can we basically translate into consistent legislative activity the goals which here are set as strategic goals for the future of the planet? I think that this is our responsibility. Thank you.
Honourable Member Zone, Chair of the Inter-Parliamentary Committee of the House of Representatives of Indonesia.
Thank you, Excellencies and distinguished delegates. I will be very brief by highlighting 2 points. First, the COVID-19 pandemic brought challenges to many aspects of our lives. However, it also gives us opportunity for paradigm shifting to move forward green economy and build a low-carbon future. In our endeavor to inject sustainability in our pathway of recovery, there is no one-size-fits-all policy. All countries, have been different priorities and circumstances. Hence, the green approach to recovery must be placed in the context of sustainable development and poverty eradication, so that we will recover with no one left behind. In its process, the transition to a low-carbon economy must be just, inclusive, and affordable. And second, it is important for us to align COVID-19 recovery and climate change policies. Sustainable economic recovery could not be achieved if we are simply returning to our pre-COVID practices. Given our powers to enact laws and oversee government policy, Parliament is a key player to establish sustainable immediate and long-term recovery. We have to ensure that legislative measures to support recovery efforts will align with our long-term environmental targets. In addition to these 2 points, I would like to emphasize on global cooperation and multilateralism. COVID-19 has triggered global health and economic crisis that calls for greater international cooperation. And as member of parliaments, we must also promote partnership and cooperation with different stakeholders
20 seconds.
to transform recovery challenges into economic opportunities and support climate action. Thank you.
Thank you. Speaker Don, Member of the Committee on Foreign Affairs of the National Assembly of Vietnam.
Honourable Chair, honourable delegates, in the current era, the development of green economies is an inevitable tendency. The serious impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic have further clarified that a lifestyle that is friendly to the environment and in harmony with the nature is necessary. Vietnam is one of the countries that have been most heavily affected by climate change. Therefore, we fully agree that the most appropriate and long-term option is green economic development. Economic growth must go together with social progress and equity. For green approaches to COVID-19 recovery, we would like to raise some thoughts. First, policies on green recovery and green economy should be developed and implemented at regional and global levels in the framework of the 2030 SDGs and the Paris Agreement on climate change. Second, we need to build a fair and effective legal framework to encourage and support organizations, individuals, and businesses with green development orientations and environmental protection. Third, public awareness on green approaches should be enhanced. And fourth, green transition requires an appropriate roadmap, taking into account the different conditions and capacities of each country. In this process, all countries need to uphold the spirit of solidarity, share responsibility in technology, finance, health, especially at this time,
20 seconds.
COVID-19 vaccines and drugs, so that we can together overcome the pandemic soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Speaker Don. And now, Honourable Member Mohammed Hassan Gusau, Member of the Senate of Nigeria.
Mr. President, my dear speakers, without doubt, Nigeria being a major oil-producing country is not isolated in facing numerous climate-related challenges, which indeed about 5 issues bothering the country, which is gas flaring, as much as 1.5 billion cubic feet of gas, the atmosphere in the last 8 years. 2, the oil spillage in the Niger Delta region. 3, desert encroachment, which has ravaged many northern states. The shrinking of Lake Chad Basin, which was once a source of abundant food supply, has quite been alarming. The duration and intensity of rainfall has increased, producing large runoff and flooding in many places in Nigeria. In the face of all those thoughts, Nigeria government has not folded its hand in resignation. To its credit, the government has signed up to all international instruments and protocols related to climate change litigation. It has implemented a series of programs, projects toward climate change litigation, as well as established several agencies dedicated to purpose. In 2015, federal government of Nigeria committed itself and several other African countries to restoring more than 84 million hectares to the degraded land as part of the African Forest Land Restoration Initiative. On the side of legislative intervention, July 2021,
20 seconds.
Nigerian National Assembly passed the long-awaited Petroleum Bill PIB, which has been assented to by the President, thereby giving the birth of Petroleum Industry Act 2021. The bill, which was presented and executable to the 6th National Assembly in 2008, will perhaps go down as one of the most protected pieces of legislation in Nigeria. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Honourable Member Gaius, Member of the Chamber of Deputies of Luxembourg.
Thank you, Mr. President. I come from a very small country, so I try to be very short. I see 3 COVID lessons. The first one is we are living in especially important times, and what connects the COVID crisis to the climate crisis is that both have to do with the right for life and the right for health. And I think that we as parliamentarians, we understand that it is the time for the morally most important challenges and highest challenges that exist. The second lesson is, in the COVID crisis, we all knew what to do. And now in the climate crisis, we also all know what to do and what we have to do in the favor of our youngsters, in the favor of justice, of social justice, of the indigenous, of poorer people, and so on. So let's do it, because the COVID crisis taught us that worldwide crises can be solved together. And the third lesson that I see from the COVID crisis is that even if we know what to do, sometimes it doesn't work out. And there are reasons, because if we stick to our old schemes, it cannot work. And so the vaccination distribution around the world didn't work as well as it had to work. And the same point will be a problem in the climate justice crisis. There will be countries who can afford the transition, and there will be countries who cannot afford the transition. What we learned from the COVID crisis is we need very strong instruments for worldwide justice. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And now, Speaker, motion Al-Basora, Deputy Speaker of the House of Representatives of Yemen.
Good evening to all. I come from Yemen, and we face a major war. We experience COVID, the drama of COVID and the drama of war in our country. Yemen, and despite of the wars and COVID and the major ensuing victims, has suffered a great deal. Our parliament, however, worked hand in hand with the government. Today, Yemen is addressing many challenges, and we're making the vaccines available to the different provinces and governorates. A major tragedy we have in Yemen is the Safar tanker with 1 billion barrels of oil. It's an outdated tanker. It may cause major pollution if the world does not move fast to force the Houthis and Iran to transfer the barrels from this tanker. Otherwise, the tragedy will be of worldwide reach. We as parliamentarians should find a solution, and we should work towards an end to the war. From today, we need to pass legislations in line with the pandemic. We should work to alleviate the burden of afflictions borne by our populations. Thank you.
The Honourable Member Velkovsky, Member of the Assembly of North Macedonia. Member Velkovsky? No?
Okay. Dear Lord Speaker, distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, this meeting has brought together parliamentarians from all around the world at a crucial moment when we are putting behind us almost 2 years made by the COVID-19 pandemic. We should find joint responses to fight pandemics such as COVID-19 and climate changes together, taking into account climate-related challenges in post-COVID-19 recovery plans. The upcoming COP26 meeting is an opportunity that should not be missed. Ladies and gentlemen, in order to overcome the consequences of the pandemic in the Republic of North Macedonia, we initiate support measures during the COVID-19 crisis, but also development measures in the post-COVID period. As a result of the implementation of 6 packages of measures worth about 11% of our GDP, North Macedonia had one of the smallest GDP declines in the region. We took a step further and aligned the COVID-19 economic recovery measures with the European Green Deal. Our commitment to the green agenda is greater than ever, and we are fully committed to reducing pollution and greenhouse gas emissions, especially by decreasing our dependence on fossil fuels and focusing on more efficient energy use. In April this year, we have adopted an updated national determined contribution to the Paris Agreement, with which we have paved our way towards decarbonizing and more recently society. We have set a very ambitious goals by the year 2030 to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions by 51% compared to 1990. In order to achieve this ambition, our government adopted a long-term strategy on climate action, while the draft law of climate action is a final stage of preparation. So, because I don't have too much time, thank you for your attention. Because we are in Italy, big grazie.
Thank you. And now, Honourable Member Paul Bioye-Umba, President of the Committee on Environment of the National Assembly of Gabon.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Lord Speaker. Gabon would like to thank the Italian Parliament for hosting this event. Gabon has a proposal to make. The first is to make sure that greater focus is placed on the conservation of ecosystems on all continents. The second proposal that we have is to move towards an energy renovation in our living spaces, promoting the use in homes and businesses and in industry of electricity and water-saving technologies and appliances, for example, programmable lamps and taps. In broader terms, we need to increase the use of energy-saving lights, in particular in developing countries, so that we can better manage energy and electricity and make savings. I thank you very much.
And now, Honourable Member Paul Nunez, Committee on Environment of the Italian Senate.
La ripresa post-pandemic.
Post-pandemic recovery risks failing the goals of social justice, racing after the needs to recover economic growth, which was missed during the 2020 pandemic, GDP. The pillar of Europe has a double goal to reduce greenhouse gas by 55% before 2030 and reduce climate neutrality by 2050. That's by 37%, and the have been allocated for this goal. It's a very significant objective, which cannot be reached by going down the wrong road, which will hold us up for future decades, like gas energy transition to gas, which has a major effect on altering the climate, with too shy attempts to change our energy structure, and also basing oneself on private innovation without public oversight, and with a predatory use of resources. The pillar of local social cohesion aims at reducing local inequalities and gender and income inequalities. Europe has given funds to countries following analyses based on geographical inequality, which definitely need to be in something which we keep our reference on. We should not forget in the current crisis that the economic crisis has been due to expansionist strategies of countries and banks, with operations aimed at reabsorbing debt could be fatal for the economy of certain countries. We should never forget that goals are social justice and environmental justice. We must face the climate emergency as we faced the COVID-19 emergency.
And now, honourable member.
Erogare. Non avevo finito.
Time up. Washington Varela.
Thank you very much.
Member of the National Assembly of Ecuador.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Lord Speaker. In our country, which is a mega-diverse country, we have the Galapagos Islands and the Amazon. It's part of the tropical rainforest ecosystem, the largest on the planet. It's urgent to strengthen and rebuild the economy with ecological initiatives valuing the cultural identity and ancestral knowledge of original peoples, indigenous models of cultivation and medicine, as well as the sustainable use of genetic and biological resources. In crisis scenarios such as climate change and the pandemic, the peoples and nations in Ecuador have faced and managed with ancestral wisdom the climatic, ecological and health risks based on good practices of biodiversity use, self-sufficiency of food sovereignty, and community solidarity with large cities that have been provided with food and medicine based on concoctions, infusions, and spiritual sessions, resulting in controlling infections through preventing and strengthening people's immune systems. In order to move from extractivism to sustainability, Ecuador needs policies and regulatory frameworks that encourage bioprospecting, research and technological development that promote innovative production chains in bioindustry. Such policies should provide enabling conditions for public, private and community investment that proposes solutions to the challenges of ecosystem degradation in the context of the bioeconomy and the circular economy. I thank you.
Honourable Member Pizarro, President of the Latin American and Caribbean Parliament. Member Pizarro? If not, okay, we'll then move on to Honourable Member Chernigoy, Member of the National Assembly of Slovenia.
The coronavirus has shaken Europe and the whole world. All the subsystems of any states were put to the test, especially our way of living together. Slovenia and all the member states are promoting a green Europe by implementing the next generation EU instrument which must be adopted to the specific development of individual member states. As we said, united in diversity. As a young parliamentarian and Christian Democrat, I will strive to face the challenges of the citizens of Slovenia. The Slovenian parliament, the legislator in the country, will historically influence the transformation and development of the national economies in the green future. We will do this by giving priority to the green infrastructure, circularity, energy efficiency, investment in green jobs, and innovation and digitalization. Young people have high expectations of new Green Deal. The quality of life in the area needs to improve. Furthermore, young people are the future. In Slovenia, the housing shortage is great. The possibilities for living are insufficient and mostly in large urban centers. For me, green also means the immigration of young people to the countryside. In Slovenia and also elsewhere, the bureaucracy and some NGOs have already destroyed many sustainable projects. Wind farm, the placement of highways and railways takes more than 10 years. Simplification and digitalization is the way to the future. A green policy can stimulate many industries, but it can also expel them from Europe. Likeability, populism at all costs without the cooperation of the whole world does not lead to the welfare of green politics, but to a fullness. Europe must open up competitiveness, not close it down. Green and economy must go hand in hand. We must not miss the opportunity, but we must be aware that without thinking and doing out of the box, we will not be able to do it. Slovenia is closely following campaigns initiated by UK 26 presidency, and we believe that represent a valuable input in our common global path towards climate neutrality. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And now, Honourable Member Celic, Member of the Parliament of Croatia. Honourable Member Celic.
Yes, there is, but he should press the button.
Dear colleagues, setting up a new green infrastructure is what our societies and states need now. We, as parliamentarians, have a crucial role in assuring that the legal infrastructure is also put in place and that support regulation needed for public investment and enable private investment in green economy. Taking all that note, the Croatian Parliament has passed a number of documents that signal a shift towards a more sustainable and green economy. In that vein, particularly important is the National Development Strategy until 2030 that incorporates our main development course towards a green and digital transition. The strategy for adaptation to climate change to 2030 is also to mention. There is a number of other laws and regulations that cover this issue. I would also like to stress that we need to encourage public participation since COVID-19 lockdown and emergency measures had negative effects on the role of the general public in environment-related issues. To conclude, the world pandemic is a potential new starting point for our economic way of life to change how we live and to start respecting our environment that gives us energy, food, air and water. We have to ask ourselves whether the modern way of life and having a viable economy necessarily mean exhausting and devastating the nature. It is our moral imperative to understand that we humans are only leaseholders on this planet. Our children will inherit the earth in the state we live it in. Thank you.
Thank you. Honourable Member Sanchez, Member of the Committee on Ecological Transition of the Congress of Deputies of Spain.
Thank you very much. Thank you for allowing us to share our ambitions. COVID has led to one of the biggest recessions in our history. We have job losses, losses in business, and we have uncertainty. This is an historic moment. We need to have recovery in our countries. We have to recover our economies, and the planet can't wait any longer. We have no choice. I would like to share a few things with you now. A world that wants to hold back global warming needs to be a circular one. Secondly, the fight against climate change requires us to take care of the well-being of people and their families. Thirdly, we must contribute to a just transition. We cannot leave behind those people who have the most difficulties when it comes to transitioning to sustainable models, whether they be countries or businesses or citizens themselves. We can only make this work if we work together. Thank you.
And now, Honourable Member Hervé Maury, Member of the Senate of France.
Merci.
Thank you very much, Lord Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, the COVID pandemic has shown the link between the environment and climate change. We've seen that the COVID-19 pandemic led to a reduction in CO2 emissions, and this reduction would need to continue until 2030 if we want to maintain the current reduction in temperature rises. So we need to make sure that we accelerate the green transition. Recent studies from the OECD have shown that only 48% of economic relaunching plans in the OECD countries mention the climate. So the situation is not at all satisfactory. France has expressed its environmental ambitions. The European Union has done the same thing. This is a good thing, but I think we need to ensure that these objectives and these ambitions are actually fulfilled. COP26 will allow us to scale up the commitments that were made at COP21, but we need to ensure that all of this doesn't just remain on paper and that we turn our words into action. We cannot leave civil society to have a monopoly in this forum. We have a role to play. I think we need to be very vigilant, and that's the call I wanted to make to all of you today, colleagues.
Much. And now, Honourable Member Patacini, Member of the Committee on Environment of the Italian Chamber of Deputies.
Honourable colleagues, with the reduction of the pressure of COVID-19, we see a return to economic growth. Italy has 6% in GDP growth. There is reduction in raw material. There's a change in raw material costs, and this is something which is making some economies struggle, and a growing demand for economy in a number of sectors with a surge in prices. Europe, with Green New Deal, has defined ambitious goals to reduce greenhouse gases with a major impact on national systems. It's important, therefore, to speak of sustainable decarbonization. There are issues of environmental sustainability and land use, agricultural work, and impact on the environment, and every choice has to bear in mind economic sustainability and social sustainability, starting from the protection of the weakest and most vulnerable individuals. The greater energy costs from sustaining decarbonization have a major impact on households in terms of the utilities they have to pay for and the cost of consumer goods. The economy sees there as a reduction in international competitivity. We think it's important to have sustainable growth, not a falling growth which has an effect on the poorest, but that in energy requirements of the world is something which must be responded to a plurality of sources of energy. And we have to make use of strategic networks. What could be the effect of on a country of a cloudy day without wind? It's important to continue decarbonization, working together in a process where everybody does his share. Forward, but cautiously, says Manzoni to the great Chancellor of Milan in his novel in the 19th century. Let us also look forward with an eye to sustainability, environmentally and socially.
Member Gonzalez, members of the Senate of Argentina. I lost it.
Thank you, Lord Speaker. Thank you for giving a voice to the parliaments of the world. In order to ensure a green recovery, we need to have a sustainable recovery, and we need to put at the heart of our actions environmental justice and social justice. We have a lot of injustice against human rights, and the people who are affected most by COVID-19 are those environmental degradation are those who are least responsible for it. We cannot leave vulnerable societies behind. We need a just transition. In my country, Argentina, we have put in place a commission to face climate change. We have signed the Paris Agreement. We have submitted our nationally determined contributions. We have done a lot when it comes to protecting our biodiversity through national parks and reserves. We are protecting our citizens, but of course all of this is not enough. If we want to accelerate all of these changes, if we want to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050, we need to move from words to actions, as our young people have been asking us. Young people in our region and around the world need help. We need not just mitigation, but also adaptation. Members of Parliament can play a very important role to guarantee that our commitments are fulfilled. I welcome the hosting of this very important day, and I welcome the inclusion of the aspect of just transition. This is very important. Thank you.
Colleagues, can I thank you for your very positive and enlightening contributions and your generosity in keeping rigidly to time. Now, with our two main speakers, I wonder if the main speakers would like to sum up. Speaker Nera or Speaker Potsy? Speaker Nera first, brief summing up.
Gracias, señor presidente. Tres mensajes. Uno, si queremos un...
Thank you, Lord Speaker. Three conclusions. If we want a Greek healthy recovery, we have to remember there's very clear interrelationship between human health and environmental health. This famous concept of One Health, which encompasses human health, animal health, and environmental health. I think without this concept, our health won't be protected. We'll continue to be very vulnerable, facing a possible future crisis, which may come from an infectious pathogen. It may be due to climate change, or it may be air pollution. Second message, we have a lot to gain if we implement the Paris Plan. Benefits, full of benefits for health, which will come from reducing air pollution. This will lead to reduction of chronic respiratory diseases, lung cancer, degenerative cerebral diseases, and we will be saving huge amounts of money in our health services. So many effects for health, and this will also help us in economic and social recovery. And this will allow us to make progress. Third message, the health system will do its share of the job. The health professionals, doctors, nurses, everybody working in the health system already begun, and they're losing patience because they see too many words bandied on climate change, but our health is still at risk. There is a contribution to CO2 and greenhouse gas from hospitals, and there's a commitment on the part of many hospitals around the world, and the WHO will be encouraging this initiative to reach a carbon neutral health system, which means that in 20 years make sure that the healthcare system will reduce its emissions to zero. This obviously is an important contribution because today the health system, if it were a country, would be the fifth in terms of emissions. Obviously, there are many countries that don't contribute at all. My final mission.
Last message, zero pollution, 100 health. And I will say it in French. Zéro pollution, la santé va être la gagnante. Cero poluição é a saúde que vai ganhar. E em espanhol, por finir, cero contaminación.
So the speaker said the same thing in French, English, Spanish, and Portuguese.
Thank you very much. And Director Potsy, any concluding remarks?
It's working, yeah. Thanks a lot, Mr. Chair. And not much to add to what we've just heard. I would just like to mention that again, at the heart of the triple planetary crisis are unsustainable patterns of consumption and production. And although they are unheavily distributed and the responsibilities for this unsustainable consumption and production are differentiated and there are different responsibilities, they do impact us all. So we need to have a radical change. A just transformation, definitely, but with a common and differentiated responsibilities, that as I said, which is driven by the need to decarbonize. We need to do it as soon as possible. Every CO2 ton that goes into the atmosphere from now on is 1 ton too much. And really, the clock has been ticking. 50 years ago, UNEP was created with the idea that we would put the environment at the center of development. 50 years later, it's still not at the heart of development and policies. And let's not repeat the same mistake with climate change. You've heard for more than 20 years that there is an issue. We know the science has proven there is an issue. And so let's tackle it with solidarity, with multilateralism, and with effective environmental governance, which lays with Parliament in their role as legislator, but also as decision makers in terms of budget and with your oversight responsibilities. Thanks.
I am informed that Director General Mature, one of the main speakers, wishes to sum up remotely. So, Director General Mature, are you on the line?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we heard all the parliamentarians speak today. All of them focused on the need, amongst other things, to enhance the renewable content in their energy mix. This is important. Mr. Speaker, we need to ask ourselves, why is it that we are not able to enhance the renewables share? Even though in many, many geographies, the vast majority of geographies in the world, renewable electricity from solar energy is today the cheapest electricity that you can get from any source. We need every leader in every country to consider solar as the energy source of choice. We believe that for this, we need to track what is happening, provide the information that is needed for advocacy within countries, so that whether it is for climate mitigation or for reducing the local environmental damages, or for reducing the bill for energy imports, or for enhancing the quality of life of people, we have the information that it needs to move to solar. Mr. Speaker, we also need to ensure that there is capacity in all countries, financial capacity, which I talked about, as well as people capacity, policy capacity to move ahead. And finally, Mr. Speaker, we need to ensure that there are real projects that create the demand, that help move policy and processes and move in money into all countries. Mr. Speaker, I will end by emphasizing how important it is for all of you to get together to enable this change to occur in every country of the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, all. And can I once again thank the main speakers, Speaker Naray, Speaker Mature and Speaker Potsi, for their contribution, but also for the members and the delegates who provided us with informed and enlightening speeches. So I am very grateful for that in that session. As many honourable members have said this afternoon, the efforts to deliver the post-COVID economic recovery have to focus too on the necessary global transition to a green economy. Each taken alone would have the potential to intimidate us, but taken together, they have the potential to overwhelm us. But the stakes are too high to take no action at all, and the goal is too valuable. Our colleague from the Netherlands spoke about, and I quote, the right to life and the right to health. And he is correct. This is what our efforts should be focused on. Another theme of our debate today was inequality. Described another way, not all of us are embarking on this journey, a journey we must all complete from the same starting point. Geographical inequality is something we should not lose sight of. In fact, as our Italian colleague was saying when she ran out of time, the dual imperatives of social justice and environmental justice should be in our minds at all times when formulating public policy relating to the global economic recovery. Our colleague from Spain described this as a just transition, and many colleagues described this as a moral imperative, something we owe to future generations. And I know we will all agree on this point. So this concludes our panel in session 1. I am informed that we're going on straight away to session 2. There will be no break. So I wish you a pleasant event, and I look forward to continuing the discussion. So many, many thanks indeed.